Somewhere right now, someone brilliant is explaining in perfect detail exactly why they should leave and not leaving anyway. She can list every reason. She's listed them to her sister, to her therapist, to herself at 2 in the morning. She is not confused about the facts. She is not lacking insight. If you gave her someone else's relationship with these exact details, she would tell them to go tonight, no hesitation. She has simply never applied that answer to her own life. That's not stupidity. Smart people don't stay in bad relationships because they can't see the problem. They stay because seeing the problem clearly and being able to act on it turn out to be two completely different skills, and nothing in their life so far has ever taught them the second one. By the end of this video, you'll understand the 3 specific mechanisms that keep intelligent, self-aware people locked into relationships they can already see clearly are hurting them. And you'll have a test you can run this week that tells you which one is actually holding you in place. Stay for that part. Most people get the diagnosis wrong on the first guess. The trap nobody sees coming. Here's the pattern before the psychology of why. Leaving a bad relationship looks from the outside like a decision. Weigh the evidence, reach a conclusion, act. That's how smart people solve almost everything else in their lives: a bad job, a bad apartment, a bad investment. Gather data, decide, move. Relationships don't work on that circuit. And the smarter someone is, the more confusing this becomes, because they keep expecting the same process that works everywhere else to eventually kick in here too. It doesn't. Not because they're weak. Because a different, older system is running the actual decision, and it doesn't take instructions from the analytical part of the brain that writes the pro and con list. That system was built for one job: keep you attached to whoever kept you alive. It doesn't grade relationships on quality. It grades them on familiarity and predictability. And a relationship you've mapped completely, even a painful one, registers as safer than an unknown one, because your nervous system's oldest question was never, "Is this good for me?" It was, "Do I know exactly what happens next?" That's the first thing to understand before any of the individual mechanisms make sense. The part of you that won't leave isn't malfunctioning. It's running exactly the program it was built to run. It's just running it against modern information it was never designed to evaluate. This is also why external advice so reliably fails to move people in this situation. "You deserve better" doesn't touch the mechanism, because the mechanism was never processing the word deserve in the first place. Deserving is a value judgment. The system holding someone in place isn't making value judgments. It's running a threat model, and an unhappy but mapped relationship consistently scores as lower threat than an unmapped future, no matter how good that future might actually be. You cannot out-argue a threat model with a better argument. You can only give it new data, slowly, in a form it's built to accept, which is exactly what the experiment later in this video is designed to do. There's a second reason smart people specifically get caught here, and it's almost the mirror image of what helps them everywhere else. Intelligence is very good at building airtight cases for both sides. A sharp mind can construct an equally convincing argument for staying and for leaving on demand, sometimes within the same conversation. That's not indecision. That's a skill working exactly as designed, applied to a question it isn't equipped to resolve alone. Two well-built arguments pointing in opposite directions don't cancel out into clarity. They cancel out into paralysis that feels, from the inside, like careful thinking. Point 1. The sunk cost that isn't about money. Call her Priya, 36, a director of operations, the kind of person whose entire career is built on knowing when to cut losses on a failing project. At work, she has ended contracts, killed initiatives, walked away from 6-figure deals the moment the data turned. She is, professionally, ruthless about sunk cost. She's given talks about it. She has been in her relationship for 7 years. The last 4 have been, by her own private accounting, more bad months than good ones. Here's what she told us. If an employee brought me this relationship as a business case, I'd have cut it in year 2. I know that. I could write the memo myself. What's actually happening isn't a math error. It's an identity problem wearing a math costume. Those 7 years aren't just time. They're the years she chose this person over other people, other paths, other versions of her life. Leaving doesn't just end the relationship. It reclassifies 7 years of her own decisions as a mistake. And the mind will tolerate almost any amount of ongoing pain before it will accept a wholesale rewrite of its own past judgment. This is why "just leave, you deserve better" lands as useless advice for someone like Priya. She already knows the math. What she hasn't done is separate the question, "Was this a mistake?" from the question, "Should I stay?" Those are two different questions, and contingent self-worth, the same trap that makes people overfunction to earn love, quietly fuses them into one. If I admit this was wrong, I have to admit I was wrong, and admitting I was wrong is unbearable in a way that outweighs another year of a bad relationship. There's a specific reason competent people fall into this harder than most. The entire architecture of Priya's professional identity is built on being right, reading situations correctly, making the correct call before the data fully confirms it, being the person whose judgment the company trusts. A wrong personal decision doesn't just cost her the relationship. It threatens the story she tells herself about being someone who doesn't make big, obvious, 7-year mistakes. So the mind does something quietly brilliant and quietly self-destructive at the same time. It keeps the relationship alive not because the relationship is working, but because an ongoing, unresolved situation can still, technically, turn around, and a technically still possible outcome is easier to live with than a confirmed loss. As long as she hasn't left, the 7 years aren't a mistake yet. They're a project still in progress. Leaving is the moment the file closes and the verdict becomes permanent, and some part of her would rather keep the file open indefinitely than let that verdict get written down. Point 2. The slot machine effect. Call him Marcus, 29, an engineer, the sort of methodical thinker who double-checks his own double-checking. He has been with his partner for 3 years and describes the relationship in almost exactly these words. 90% of the time it's exhausting, but the other 10% is the best I've ever felt with anyone. That 10% is doing more work than the 90% that's exhausting him, and there's a specific, well-documented reason why. Predictable reward is easy to walk away from. If good treatment came every single day and it stopped, the loss would be obvious and the grief would be clean. But unpredictable reward, good treatment that arrives on no fixed schedule after unpredictable stretches of difficulty, is the single most powerful pattern for keeping a brain engaged that behavioral science has ever identified. It's the exact mechanism that makes slot machines addictive, not the wins. The not knowing when the next one is coming. Marcus isn't staying for the 90%. He's staying because the unpredictable 10% has trained his brain to treat the relationship like a machine that might pay out any time now, and walking away feels, to the part of his brain running this calculation, like cashing out one pull before the jackpot. Intelligence doesn't protect against this. If anything, a sharp, pattern-hungry mind is more susceptible to a genuinely unpredictable pattern, because it's better at half noticing the near misses and worse at admitting the machine is rigged. Here's the detail that makes this especially hard to see from the inside. Variable reward schedules don't just keep people engaged, they make the good moments feel more intense than they would in a stable, predictable relationship. That's not an illusion Marcus is imagining, it's measurable. Reward that arrives unpredictably produces a stronger dopamine response than reward that arrives on schedule, which means the good 10% of an unstable relationship can genuinely, chemically, feel better than the reliable good moments of a stable one. Marcus isn't wrong that the best moments with his partner feel extraordinary. He's wrong about why. It's not because the connection is unusually deep. It's because the unpredictability itself is manufacturing the intensity. The same way a near miss on a slot machine lights up the brain almost as much as an actual win. This is also why people in this pattern often describe stable, kind, low-drama relationships afterward as boring. Not because those relationships are actually worse, but because a nervous system trained on variable reward has recalibrated its baseline. Predictable warmth stops registering as warmth at all. It just registers as quiet. And quiet, to a system braced for unpredictability, doesn't feel like relief. It feels like something is missing. Point 3. The wrong question about being alone. Call her Odalys, 41, a physician, highly capable, financially independent, with nothing structurally keeping her in her marriage except one thing she said almost as an aside. I've never actually lived alone. Not once. Not in my whole life. This is more common than it sounds, and it rarely gets named directly, because it's embarrassing to say out loud when you're accomplished in every other area. The fear isn't of being single. It's of being alone with yourself, without a witness, without anyone whose presence tells you who you are by contrast. For people who built their identity partly through relationship, the good partner, the one who holds things together, the fixer, solitude isn't neutral. It's the absence of the mirror. They've used their whole life to know they exist. Odalys isn't weighing unhappy together against happy alone. Her nervous system is weighing unhappy together against unknown, unwitnessed, possibly unbearable, and an unhappy known quantity beats an unknown quantity almost every time, for the same reason Priya's sunk cost outweighs 7 years of accumulating evidence. It's not that being alone would actually be worse. It's that she has no data on it at all, and no data reads as more dangerous than bad data to a system built for prediction, not happiness. Quick gut check and actually answer this one rather than skimming past it. If you pictured one full week alone right now, with no relationship to manage and no one checking in on you, does the image that comes up feel like rest, or does it feel like disappearing? People are often startled by their own answer to this, because it's rarely the one they'd have predicted intellectually. Drop it in the comments if you're willing. It matters more than it sounds like it should. There's a version of this that shows up even in people who have been single before, so it's worth nomming precisely. It isn't always the fear of solitude itself. Sometimes it's the fear of solitude without a project. Odalys has never been single as the accomplished, financially secure adult she is now. Every prior stretch of being alone happened while she was still building towards something, still had a clear next milestone in front of her. Being alone with nothing left to prove is a different, less familiar kind of alone, and the mind can mistake unfamiliarity here for danger just as easily as it does anywhere else in this pattern. The reveal: comfort is not the same signal as compatibility. Here's the distinction that dissolves all three of these at once, and it's easy to say and very hard to feel. Comfort and compatibility are measuring two completely different things, and your nervous system cannot naturally tell them apart. Compatibility is about whether two people's actual needs, values, and ways of loving fit together over time. Comfort is about whether your nervous system has stopped flagging a situation as a threat. You can have comfort with zero compatibility. Years of exposure will do that to almost any situation, good or bad. Scar tissue doesn't mean healing. It means repetition. This is why, but it feels so familiar, it feels like home, is one of the least reliable signals a person can use to evaluate a relationship, and also one of the most emotionally convincing. Familiar and good feel identical from the inside. They are not the same thing, and the only way to tell them apart is not by feeling harder, it's by testing. Put the three case files side by side and the shape becomes obvious. Priya's sunk cost, Marcus's variable reward, Odalys' fear of unwitnessed solitude, three different mechanisms, but every one of them is solving for the same variable, reducing uncertainty, not increasing well-being. None of these systems were ever asking, will this make me happy? They were asking, Will this keep me safe from the unknown? And a bad, fully mapped relationship answers that question better than an unknown future does, even when the unknown future is almost certainly better. That's the whole trap, stated plainly. Your nervous system is optimizing for a variable that has nothing to do with your happiness, and it will keep winning that optimization silently, for years. Unless something forces the two variables apart long enough to see them separately. The experiment. You cannot think your way to knowing whether you're staying for compatibility or for comfort. You have to test it, the same way you test any other confusion between two signals that feel identical. Here's the version of the test that works. For 2 weeks, keep a private, honest log not shared with your partner, not for anyone else, answering one question each night. Today, did being with this person add something to my life that being alone would not have? Or did today mainly consist of managing, tolerating, or waiting for it to get better? Don't average it in your head at the end. Write the daily answer down. The pattern will tell you something your feelings alone have been unable to tell you for months or years, because feelings blur comfort and compatibility together in real time. A log doesn't blur anything. It just counts. If you're already flinching at the idea of doing this, if some part of you doesn't want the data, sit with that reaction for a second, because it's information too. People don't usually avoid evidence that will confirm what they already believe. 2 weeks is the minimum, not the ideal. Variable reward schedules are specifically designed by nature, not by your partner necessarily on purpose, to produce enough good days scattered through enough bad ones that a short log can still get skewed by a lucky week. If you can stretch it to 4 weeks, do that instead. The extra time isn't about being thorough for its own sake. It's about outlasting the specific pattern that's been outlasting your judgment. One more piece of the test, because people often ask this afterward. Don't share the log with your partner while you're keeping it, and don't let it turn into evidence for an argument. That's not the log's job. Its only job is to give the part of your brain that keeps saying, but it's not always bad, an honest count it can't argue with. What you do with the answer afterward, talk to your partner, seek couples counseling, or begin planning an exit, comes after you have the data, not instead of it. The reframe. Priya's problem was never information. Marcus's problem was never intelligence. Odalis's problem was never courage in the abstract. She has plenty of it everywhere else in her life. Their problem in all 3 cases was the same one. A nervous system built for prediction, mistaking the familiar for the safe, and no test in place to catch the difference before years went by. That's the pattern under why smart people stay in bad relationships. Not weakness, not low standards. A signal processing error running quietly, deciding what's safe, means before the rational mind ever gets a vote. If this described a relationship you're in, or one you just left and are still making sense of, the 2-week log is where to start, not a conversation with your partner, not yet. Get your own data first. And if you've ever wondered why you can solve everyone else's problems in under a minute and still can't get out of your own head about your own life, that's not a coincidence, and it's not a separate issue. That's next.